2, 1. Welcome in to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Erickson, not Ian Hartitz. I am still joined by PFF's own Dwayne McFarland, but we are filling in. We're stepping up our game because our guy Ian is away in Florida, Sunshine State, beachside with a drink in hand, but we still got to get the injury report out. We still need to do the pod. So, Dwayne, are you excited to take over the podcast?
I'm excited. Yes. Anytime you get the words take over, I'm excited.
Oh, baby. Super, super excited. Super stoked to be recording this podcast with you, Dwayne, and filling in for Ian. So, as always, every
You're gonna make
Friday
me blush, Andrew. Don't make me blush.
As always, we're going to break down all of the injuries from around the league. We've got a ton of them, as we always do. It is football, a physical sport. So we're going to break them down by position, go through each of them, talk about the fantasy football implication, all of the news and notes, all the implications for week 9. So let's start with the quarterback position, Dwayne. And I think the biggest name that is not named Aaron Rodgers, because we kind of know that he was already ruled out earlier this week, is Kyler Murray. He is dealing with an ankle injury that he sustained last week, and it's now a game time decision. And he plays in the late game. So he plays at 4:25. Both him and DeAndre Hopkins are both game time decisions. How are you approaching Kyler Murray in the rankings? And what advice would you give to some fantasy managers who have Kyler Murray? Maybe they're looking for a streamer. What say you?
Yeah, so I've already moved Murray down in my ranks. I bumped him down to 9. He was at 4 before the game time decision news came out. But the thing with Murray, and get your thoughts too here, Andrew, whenever he's not healthy, he's one of these players where it really does matter. Like if he's coming into, a game, we've seen it with the shoulder. And he's already had the shoulder issue earlier this year. He had it last year. We saw the dip in production. He was lights out before that. But it does affect the way he plays because he scrambles less. They design less rushing plays for him. And that's part of the beauty of Kyler Murray, right, is all of the rushing yards that you get. The other thing is, obviously the Cardinals have been leading a lot this season. They've led almost more than any other team in the NFL. When I say lead, playing with 4 or more point, leads. So this should be a competitive game, against, the 49ers. So I don't know that they'll necessarily lead all the time, but there's just enough doubt with me for Murray with it being a late game. I'm already moving him down the ranks. I don't expect him to be as viable as he usually is playing, with an injury. And if there's a situation where I've got another good quarterback on my roster, that's playing in the early game rather than waiting, like say maybe you do have a pivot option, but you don't like it. I think this is a week where you just go ahead and play your other option. To be honest, I don't think this is that hard of a decision for me to pivot away from Murray just because of the splits we've seen with him with injury versus without.
I could not agree more. I definitely don't think that Murray is necessarily worth waiting for. We wait for him because he runs, and that's probably not going to be the case. He's dealing with an ankle injury. He's also down weapons. AJ Green has COVID. You have DeAndre Hopkins, who's also really banged up. So I just don't see why you want to wait for Murray. If you do have to wait, or if you have faith that Murray's going to be able to come through, but then he ends up being inactive, okay, your pivot options probably are Jordan Love and Jimmy Garoppolo. Like those are the 2 guys that are playing in the later window that you could probably potentially pivot to. And again, I don't love those alternatives, especially with a couple other decent streamers on the waiver wire this week. So
Jimmy G's going to now have potentially 3 nice weapons, but the thing is you just never know when they're going to potentially implement Trey Lance back into the offense. And that's the killer really for Jimmy G. The fact that it's a run heavy offense, but he's shown in the past he can have these spike games, where they just all of a sudden have this crazy efficiency and you're like, oh wow, Jimmy G on 22 completions had 330 yards. He's about to have his full complement of weapons, but you just worry about Trey Lance sniping work from him down inside the 5. We don't know if that's going to return sometime soon.
Yeah, so Kyler Murray, I would put him on your bench and look for some alternatives. Other quarterback news. So Aaron Rodgers is out with COVID. Dwayne, any just other thoughts that you just want to get off your chest about Rodgers? I know that he's he said a lot today on Friday that when we're recording this. Any non-political thoughts about Aaron Rodgers, at least for fantasy?
Yeah, I think folks probably have Aaron Rodgers fatigue, at the moment. So I'm not gonna, litter them with that. What I will say is with Jordan Love, it's a decent matchup, right, with the Chiefs. Now, the Chiefs haven't been the typical Chiefs, right, which are able to put you in a situation where you got to really open your offense up. We've seen them really struggle over the last 2 games. But I do like the matchup for Jordan Love. You are getting Devontae Adams back. He was officially, brought back onto the roster today. You should get Alan Lazard back. So it's like the team's getting healthier. I do expect them to try to win the game running. It is a great matchup on the ground for the Packers. But if I had to choose between Jordan Love and between Jimmy G, like as my pivot, if kind of going back to the Kyler Murray thing, I think I'd probably choose Jordan Love just because I think he's going to be out there the whole time. And there's a chance that this game gets into a shootout. Jordan Love, it will be interesting to see where his ownership or his rostership comes in on DFS this weekend. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Andrew, but it's not like he's not the running option. I see some people think that he is. Like, not that he can't, scramble, but he's not a rusher by trade, if you will say, from a quarterback position.
Yeah, he's not like a Trey Lance, Justin Fields type of rusher. I would maybe put him more like in the Carson Wentz category of a rusher. Maybe like Mahomes at, in a good week or something like that. I agree. I think that Jordan Love is in a pretty decent spot this week. If you look at the PFF projections, he's a QB. I think he's QB7, like QB6. Like, he's up there, and that's because he has weapons. He has efficient weapons. He has Adams. He has Aaron Jones. Like, that's why he's ranked so high. It's not because he himself is this elite, quarterback option. It's because he's throwing to elite options, and that's really what matters at most. And you're going to see the Chiefs put up points in this game, so he's going to have to put up points as well. So I think that Jordan Love makes a lot of sense from a streaming standpoint, and he's so cheap on DFS, 4,400. I know I talked about him as a tournament play. I think he's a little thin for cash because he is super. I mean, he could bottom out really quick. Like, we don't know how many points he could score, and you want to stack him with Devontae Adams, and if that connection just doesn't hit, then you're kind of sunk with that lineup in cash. But I think that in tournaments, I think that he makes a ton of sense as a pivot option. Other quarterbacks, so Matthew Stafford, he's logged back-to-back DNPs, and then he was limited on Friday, but McVay says game status not in doubt. So you're firing up Stafford, top 5 quarterback. Taysom Hill has been practicing, but he will not be starting in this game. So kind of at least surprised to me a little bit. I know there was some talk about Trevor Simeon after he performed admirably against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I mean, I checked out his PFF grade, 39.4 PFF grade last week. It doesn't look great to me. I know that he did enough to get the win, but I really don't think that he was the driving force behind the Saints coming away with that Tampa Bay with the victory for New Orleans. Taysom Hill being out, Trevor Simeon, how does this affect the Saints players in your opinion? So is this good for Kamara, bad for Kamara, neutral? I think we're not starting any of these Saints receivers anyway. Is it just start Kamara, and then does he move at all with Taysom Hill?
It's probably good for Kamara just because we know last year in the games that we had Taysom Hill together with Alvin Kamara, he was only at a 14% target share. And a lot of that was because he had one really big game with him, right? We had several weeks where it was just like, man, you could not get any targets. It just goes back to, the quarterbacks that run, they don't check it down as much. And then that also affects play design. So I think for this week, it probably does help a little bit. But in the end of the day, you're just not really excited about starting anyone, on the Saints outside of Kamara, just because it's a complete rotation at receiver, it's a rotation at tight end, and they really don't want to throw the ball, Andrew. I think Sean Payton knows. I don't think this. I know that Sean Payton knows his path to winning this year is really just to play his old mentor, Bill Parcells, right? Just manage everything as close to the vest as you can. Hope the other team messes up. Lean on your defense. I know all these old cliche things that we don't think are hip anymore in football. But if you can manage the turnover game, you can still have a chance to win games. And so basically the Saints recipe right now is let the other team beat themselves. That's the first path. Then if they have to open things up because that path is not working, they can adjust and they may try to do some of those things. But I think overall it's probably a better thing for, you're going to start Kamara no matter what, right? If he's on your roster, but we'll have to see what happens with Taysom Hill. Look, having Michael Thomas, he's out for the rest of the season now at this point. So, I mean, I don't think there's any scenario, no matter who's starting, where Kamara doesn't lead the team in receiving. It's just a matter of, can he be up around that 20% mark when Hill returns?
Yeah, I moved Taysom Hill. I moved Alvin Kamara just about up in my rankings. Taysom Hill, he's probably gonna be involved still as a rusher. He was actually averaging 6 carries per game before his injury. So we'll see if maybe they don't run him as much because he's coming off the concussion. But he's probably going to, if he's active and playing, they're going to use some 2 quarterback formation. So if Taysom Hill does score the occasional vulture touchdown, then it's just kind of running bad. But you're going to start Kamara, no problems there. Ben Roethlisberger is questionable. He had a new shoulder injury on the report coming up on Friday. They have an extra day because they play on Monday night. So I think that if you're streaming Roethlisberger, which I know that I'm in a situation where I may be forced to stream him because I thought I was going to stream Taysom Hill. That is no longer the case. So now Big Ben is one of the options I'm looking for. I think that it's a good matchup against the Bears. I mean, Roethlisberger's, he's fine. Like, you're not crazy about starting him. I actually like Jordan Love more from an upside standpoint, but Roethlisberger is kind of in the back end QB2 range. Sam Darnold is officially questionable with a concussion and shoulder injury. PJ Walker is potentially going to start if Darnold can't go. I think the answer here is just Patriots DST is really what you want to do. DJ Moore is probably the only guy that you're starting from Carolina, at least from the receivers. Hubbard is locked and loaded because of the volume that he's getting. DJ Moore, where do you have DJ Moore ranked?
Yeah, I've got DJ Moore right now sitting. I've got him at wide receiver 11 right now. And again, it's just what you said. It's based purely on volume. Like, he's dominating volume. And what's funny is, like, I can't solve this equation. It's crazy to me. It's like a crazy Rubik's Cube where they keep moving the stickers around on you. Like, when you look at the Carolina Panthers offense, like, they run a ton of plays, but they're so inefficient in every way. They're inefficient running the ball. They're inefficient passing the ball. So it's crazy to me how many plays they actually get off in a game. But the bigger factor is really just over the last several weeks, like, the passing, yardage has been terrible for Sam Darnold. And you can throw a few passes in there for PJ Walker, as well. But I've got DJ Moore sitting right there at 12. But I did struggle with it a little bit this week, Andrew, because I put him as a probable downgrade, in the utilization report this week. And so next week, I'm probably just going to have to be like, look, the volume is there. But at this point, we just have to say this offense is terrible. And he's going to have to move down to more like mid wide receiver 2 range instead of low end wide receiver 1, high end wide receiver 2. I don't know what your thoughts are, though.
Yeah, it's weird to think that he's like a safe play because he has the volume, but there's no really upside attached to his profile. He's always had issues scoring touchdowns anyway. This game against the Patriots previews as more of a slog than anything else. Two teams that are fine with running the football. And I mean, with all the injuries on the Panthers with their quarterbacks, it's not shaping up to be a DJ Moore ceiling week necessarily. I mean, he's a guy that you definitely would maybe want to dabble in tournaments because he does have just a high target share in this offense. But I think Belichick could ultimately be like, all right, we're going to take away DJ Moore and let Robbie Anderson, let Terrace Marshall beat us for the Carolina passing attack. So DJ Moore.
And their offense is changing. Like, when you look at the Panthers, if you look at them for the season, they rank – this is where it gets crazy though, right? They rank 3rd in plays per game, and this is regulation. This gets rid of overtime. They rank 6th in rushing attempts per game, and they rank 11th in dropbacks per game. That's where it's just it's kind of, perplexing. Now, it's down a little bit over the last 3 games. They're 15th in dropbacks per game, which is 41. They're 12th in plays per game, 67.3, but they're 9th in rushing attempts per game at 26.3. So it's a weird situation. They're not very good, but they somehow get volume despite being terrible. It's really a weird equation. You don't see this that often for how bad they've been over the last few weeks. But yeah, it is enough volume that it's keeping him right there, in that top 12 for me, but he's borderline going to be moving down for me moving forward.
Tyrod Taylor is going to be starting for the Houston Texans coming off IR. Tyrod Taylor, the NFL's leader in fantasy points per dropback this season. He did start the season pretty well. The first 6 quarters that he played against the Jaguars and a half against the Cleveland Browns. Tyrod Taylor, is he someone that you would think is a streamer this week, Dwayne? If you have Kyler Murray, would you look at Tyrod Taylor? I know that Tyrod Taylor is another guy I'm looking at because I had to drop Taysom Hill in one of my leagues. I put in a bid for Tyrod Taylor. It's a good matchup against the Miami Dolphins, and Taylor did look decent when he was active. He has Brandon Cooks. Is that enough?
Probably not. If I'm in a super deep format, say you're playing in one of these 14 team leagues, or you're playing in a super flex format, whether it's 10, 12 teams, in those situations for sure, Tyrod Taylor could be in play. But otherwise, I'm not going to probably try to get cute with this. I just don't like the weapons in Houston. I don't like the offensive line. I really don't like anything about it. I do agree that the matchup is probably, it's pretty fair. This game, I would still favor Miami, obviously, in the game, but I think it is a situation where it could be closer than what people think. I typically don't try to get cute, though, with players like this. I think Houston is terrible. And so I just really don't want any part of it, because if the other team can take away their top target, which, is Brandon Cooks, like it's like ball game. It's like, what else can they do? I know Chris Moore had that one game where he was like wide open twice and scored like 30 fantasy points a few weeks back against the Patriots. But like, you're just not going to get lightning in the bottle like that, most likely multiple times. So there's just not a lot to like for me, in my opinion, with Houston, despite the fact that, he's only 5,000 on DK, probably going to be owned under 2%. I'm not feeling it.
Yeah, no, I think in DFS, I think I'd rather just play Jordan Love. He's cheaper.
Yeah, I agree.
He probably has a little more ups because he has weapons. Like, that's the thing. Like, Tyrod Taylor really only has Brandon Cooks. Like, that's it. And that's why Cooks is a good play this week, because he gets the upgrade with Tyrod Taylor instead of Davis Mills under center. The only other quarterback injury to talk about, Dak Prescott, I want to mention, is off the injury report altogether. Yep. So he should be locked and loaded as a top end player this week. So you're starting him with no concerns. Tua Tagovailoa had a banged up finger on his throwing hand, suffered versus the Bills. Flores is optimistic that Tua will play. I mean, this is a really good spot for Tua. He's shown that he can beat up pretty bad defenses. Miami throws a lot more than most other offenses do. I know I have Tua as like I think I have him as a top 10 quarterback this week for fantasy. Dwayne, do you still feel comfortable with Tua? I think he's probably one of the top. I think he's like the top streaming quarterback this week, because I know he was on a lot of waiver wires after he played the Bills last week.
Yeah, I think he makes a great streaming play. We are now certain Devontae Parker is out. He's actually, we'll talk about that in a minute, but he did go to IR. So we're back down to, Mike Gesicki as well as Jalen Waddle. So you really like it when you have that third option. Yeah, Mac Hollins has been able to work in and do some things, but most defenses, they're just really not afraid of Mac Hollins. It is a great matchup, though. From a quarterback strength of schedule standpoint, if you look at the PFF metrics and the way PFF creates these strength of schedule metrics is really based on looking at player grades, who's injured, who's in, who's out, all those sort of things. And Tua still grades as a perfect 10.0 QB SOS. So he has the top matchup on the slate. So that's a positive for him. I'd rather him have three, weapons. It's kind of the rule of three in the NFL. Like, if you have three really good weapons, you can beat almost any defense. If you just have two, like, a defense could have a good game against you and manage to shut down one or the other, and then it's just problematic for your offense. So I don't like that, but it is the Texans. That's what I keep coming back to. It's the Texans. I've got him at 11 right now, but I highlighted him earlier today. He's a guy I'm thinking about. Do I move him down? So, like, right now, Andrew, I don't know where you are, but I've got him slightly ahead of Daniel Jones and Ryan Tannehill. And then I've got him just below Kyler Murray and Derek Carr. So, I mean, he's right. And that's a QB 11. So he's right there, kind of in that range you're talking about, low end QB1 streamer. Yeah,
I think that's solid. And I know you talked about the rule of three, and maybe that's it. The Texans, they're the third component. Like,
they're the third component. Yeah,
they're the third piece. Or you could always throw in Myles Gaskin as well as a pass catching back. If he plays, we'll see what happens with him and his touch count in the question mark of the curious case of the Miami Dolphins backfield.
I love Gesicki this week, but we'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah, I like the Dolphins. I like the stack in DFS because we know exactly where Tua is going to throw the ball. He's going to throw the ball to Waddle. He's going to throw the ball to Gesicki. So the Tua double stack definitely in play in DFS this week. Before we get to the running backs, we're going to take a quick break to pay some bills. Right now, you can get a 25% off any PFF subscription if you use the code FANTASY. Grades and data are alive for every single player who logged a snap last week. Go check out the highest graded players from week 8. What can you get with the PFF subscription? All of PFF's locked article content, weekly player rankings to help you set your lineups, strength of schedule for every fantasy player, PFF's NFL and college football betting dashboards, our grade power projections and cover probabilities, and more. Support the pod and use promo code FANTASY for 25% off any subscription. Running backs, Dwayne, Derrick Henry put on IR. Adrian Peterson signed an active roster, is a permanent move, so he's off of the practice squad officially, and it's because he's been impressive. What are you doing with these running backs? You have McNichols, you have Adrian Peterson, and our guy Brian Drake from your podcast. You actually sent me a little message under the radar about how he had heard that Deontay Foreman was actually going to see starter snaps in this game.
That was from Greg Cassell.
Yep.
On his podcast.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's going to happen, though, at this point, though. I was double checking, and I just actually Googled for it again. I don't see anything about – because Foreman's on the practice squad as well. Okay. So I don't see anything about him coming up. So we'll have to wait and see what the news is on that. My gut tells me now, based off of everything that I've read about Peterson today, it does sound like he's starting. I'm not an insider like Greg Cosell, so who knows? We could hear on Sunday morning. I've got some sneaky waivers put in on Foreman, like for like min bids that go through on Sunday just in case. And then if I need to, I'll just cut him again. But yeah, we'll have to pay attention to it on Sunday morning. I'm anticipating right now, Andrew, is that probably see Adrian Peterson handle 60 to 70% of the work that Henry was getting on the ground. No one's going to handle everything Henry was getting. And I think you see an expanded role for McNichols. I think he'll probably see 30% of the rushing attempts instead of 10 or 15%. He'll handle all the passing down work. So you're never going to fully replace Derrick Henry. And then if Foreman is active, I would probably expect that he does rotate in as well. So then all of a sudden, if we see that, you could see Peterson maybe getting 50%, right, of what we were seeing out of, Derrick Henry. Then maybe you get 30% from Foreman, 20% from McNichols, something like that. If Foreman's active, like even if he's not, I'm kind of trying to avoid it, to be honest. I don't like the matchup against the Rams. I don't like the fact they could be getting blown out. So the game environment, the scoring environment could be bad for backs, and especially with the style, right, that the Titans want to play. So I'm trying to avoid it where I can. I do have a few teams where I've got some bye week issues and things like that, where I'm going to go ahead and throw Peterson out there as my RB2. But those are pretty rare instances. I'm not opting to put him in the flex over any kind of receivers that I like or anything like that. If you're doing that, I think you're probably getting, kind of cart before the horse. I'd rather like to see a week of this. Honestly, I'd like to see like 2 weeks. I know some of you are like, hey, I can't. It's like crunch time. I got to do it. And I get it. Like if your roster's forcing you to do that, I have a few of those and I'm doing it. But overall, I'm really trying to take more of a wait and see approach because I don't know for sure. I'm giving you my best guess on how I think they're going to handle this.
Yeah, I agree with that sentiment. Adrian Peterson was a sit for me in the start sit this week. I just did not like I didn't like the matchup. And
where do you have Peterson in your ranks right
now? I probably have him a little bit too low. I probably moved Deontay Foreman up a little bit too much. I think I have him like in the 40s. I just don't like him really that much. I just don't know what the role is going to be like. The matchup's terrible. He's not going to be used as a pass catcher, and that's what this game kind of profiles as, where the Titans are trying to catch points. So I've ranked him out of where you would probably want to start him. Like I think that there's more upside with some of these other backup running backs, like an AJ Dillon, like a Tony Pollard. Even if they don't see like the same type of volume, they're just better players and they're better set up for success in their offenses.
I did rank McNichols ahead of him.
Same.
Because of especially in PPR and half PPR. But right now, I've got Peterson sitting at 29, but it's really a tier thing, right? I've got him in tier 5 where I've got McNichols, Boston Scott, Adrian Peterson, Tony Pollard, James Conner, AJ Dillon, Ty Johnson, and Devin Singletary. So, I think when you listen to the tier, it kind of tells you what I think. It's you're basically trying with any of those backs that you start, you need a touchdown. McNichols could come through on the PPR, but pretty much you need a touchdown from any one of those backs.
Yeah, and Peterson showed us I think it was last Thanksgiving, actually. I think he scored like 2 touchdowns. So that's what you're praying for if you use
Peterson. Look, for all the jokes, like when I watch him, like he's not what he was, obviously, but he knows how to play in an NFL offense. Mm-hmm. Like he knows how to get, north-south. He knows how to make his one jump cut, do what he does. He's not going to outrun a bunch of guys to angles, but he's still very physical. Like he's going to get you yards after contact, not going to break the long plays. But I think that Peterson, he's one of these medical marvels. Like, I don't know how he keeps himself in such great shape and how he continues to do what he's doing, but it's still probably better than a lot of backs that have been sitting on rosters all year, despite the fact that he's 36.
Yeah, and the schedule softens up. They play the Rams this week. They play the Saints the next week. And then it gets a lot easier. There's a couple layup matchups, Jaguars, Texans. Yeah. And that's where you can probably feel like, okay, like, here we go, Adrian Peterson. Like, let's go. I'm going to be
That's
excited.
Really a great point. Just because you may have put some fab dollars down on Peterson, and I think this is hard for people. Like, they go splurge, especially late in the season like this. If you had fab dollars left, you probably had to spend a decent amount to get Peterson. People's immediate reaction is, I have to get them into my lineup. Like, avoid that if you can. Like, if you need him, great. We already talked about it. You use Peterson. But it doesn't mean that he doesn't have additional value, to your point, Andrew, moving forward. It could still be a great investment, but you're looking for the right game. This is the absolute worst game Peterson could enter against the Rams. They're going to trail. It's a good rushing defense. Like, they're going to probably turn Tannehill over multiple times in the game. It's a very tough game situation for Peterson with his skill set to step in and have a lot of confidence.
McCaffrey, Matt Rule said that he's hopeful that CMC makes his return. Regardless, he's going to be on a pitch count less than 40 to 50% of the snaps. We're going to know more about it on Saturday or when you guys are listening to this podcast. Seems like it's a situation where you'd rather just have him not play at all. Is it just hey, if you're desperate, you can throw him out there because he's McCaffrey?
I feel like we've been through this before. I'm like, guys, like, didn't we just do this? Like, come on. Like, you're the Panthers. You suck anyway. Like, don't get him hurt. Come on.
Does McCaffrey – so, I mean, if McCaffrey plays, then you can't start Hubbard.
Oh, no, yeah. Chuba's out. Like, I've still got Chuba right now. I'm treating this as of, Friday at 3:47 p.m. Central, 4:47 Eastern. I've still got Chuba as the lead back, and I don't have McCaffrey ranked. But I probably will change – it's one of those things where I don't want to change the rankings 27 times, Andrew. I'm going to wait and see what I hear tomorrow morning, and I'm going to make my adjustments, and I'll resubmit my articles and rankings, my article around tiers and rankings. But if McCaffrey's going to play, like, Chuba goes down to like tier 7, my bottom tier. Like, he goes down there. Well, he'll probably be around tier 6, like, because I expect him to get a little bit more work, but you won't be able to use him.
Yeah, and if McCaffrey plays – I mean, chances are you probably don't have many better options. Again, if you've been playing Hubbard instead of McCaffrey. You just got to play him, man. Yeah. You just got to play him. Unless you're in a really small format, like if you're playing in like an 18 league with small benches where, you and I get these screenshots of these loaded teams. These people asking me these questions, and I apologize to you guys. I love you all, but sometimes I don't respond. I'm like, you're loaded. Like, I don't even – just like start any of them. You're good.
You're good. Start any one of those players. But yeah, if McCaffrey plays, I mean, most likely, I mean, he was your probably round 1, pick 1. You're going to just need to stick him in there. And biggest thing, let's just hope he doesn't get hurt again. Because I think we're all ready to see fully healthy CMC.
Yep. And he's probably just to stay away in DFS. I don't think this is a situation where like you're trying to buy low on McCaffrey. I mean, if he's not playing enough, like he's not going to be able to get the 30 points that you want from him. He's going to have to play more. So probably stay away in DFS. Saquon Barkley has been ruled out. It looks like Devontae Booker is getting another 3-down workload. I know that his usage has been really great without Saquon Barkley. I mean, he's been a legit bell cow back, involved as a rusher and in the passing game, which I think is really huge and kind of an underrated part of his game. Not to say he's like this great pass catching back, but they're throwing in the ball and he's racking up receiving yards. So they have another running back that also has COVID, Gary Brightwell. So it's really just Elijah Penny is the only other running back that is going to probably be active in this game. So Booker is probably set up pretty well from a usage standpoint.
Yeah, I've got him at RB18 this week. So, I mean, I've got Chase Edmonds and Myles Gaskin right above him. Then I've got Booker at 18. Then I have Hubbard and I have Darrell Williams. So you have the Booker, Hubbard, Williams replacement tier. Yep. All sitting there at 18, 19, and 20.
The replacement tier. You just roll with these guys. I mean, if you've been playing Booker, you just keep playing him and you just hope that he just continues to put up these RB2 numbers.
Yeah, he has not been good. Like, none of these replacement backs honestly have been good. Like, when you look at our missed tackles forced per attempt, you look at yards after contact, you look at explosive runs. Booker's actually been better than the other two in explosive runs, but some of them have come in weird situations like 3rd and 18 draw plays and stuff like that you have to get rid of, like, to really kind of normalize the data. But the beauty with Booker over the other two has really been a true what you just mentioned. It's been an every down role. He gets long down and distance. He gets the 2-minute offense. He gets the short down and distance work. I mean, basically, like, he really is in the full role of Saquon Barkley minus like all the talent. And we know
just like
volume is still king. And that's really how, I mean, if you look at Booker's finishes, like, they don't lie. Like, he's been in the top 24 pretty much, I think, every week. Like, and he's been like up like near the top 12, several times, while Barkley's been out in PPR formats anyway, a little bit less than standard. But yeah, Booker, we're locked in. It's safe. I mean, I put him right there in that 16 to 20 range.
Yeah, I think Booker is someone you want to look at as a cash consideration in DFS this week because he's one of the cheaper running backs. He's below 6K. I know it's like him and Myles Gaskin that are kind of that third running back after you pay up for Zeke and Austin Eckler. And I prefer Booker. Just his role is way more secure. I mean, Gaskin, it could be 3 different things like what they decide to do. They could run Salvin Ahmed because the Texans have a bad run defense. And they're like, oh, we're just going to give the ball to Ahmed today. Like
we have to get Patrick Laird on the field. Like, I don't understand any thought process that includes that.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. James Robinson is questionable. He's kind of been limited. Pain tolerance thing. Are you feeling confident about starting him against the Bills?
Don't trust it. I just don't trust it. And man, Robinson has really been phenomenal. Like, the more he plays and he's out there, the more it just cements, why did they ever take Travis, Etienne? I just don't get it. So he's come through, but yeah, like, this is a situation where DNP, limited practice, and it's going to be a pain tolerance thing. I really don't trust this situation at all. I'm trying to avoid Robinson any way I can. If I have to, I just don't have any other options. I mean, fine, I'll stick him in there as an RB2, but I worry even if he plays, Andrew, it's one of these situations where, because we know what's going to happen, right? They're going to give him a shot before the game. They're going to give him a shot. They're going to get him out there. And then when the shot wears off, or if he gets, twists something the wrong way or gets re-injured, like, it's
Carlos Hyde time.
Yes, it could just be the early exit. And we know that this is a coach that's been willing in the past to give Hyde a little bit of love too, and this might be his chance to kind of reinforce that. So I really love what we've seen from Robinson, and I think he's showing he's a really good back, but I don't think we can use him this week.
Yep, I agree. The lower body injuries just they suck away explosiveness that running backs have. It's part of James Robinson's game. And, they could just, if they're getting, they're going to get blown out. We all know that. So they're going to take Robinson out. It's going to be Carlos Hyde, check down city. So, yeah, hopefully Robinson just gets ruled inactive and you can just start Hyde and just hope that he catches a bunch of dump off passes, because that's kind of what you're looking at with him as a replacement. Latavius Murray is doubtful. He's probably not going to play. He's not practicing after the bye week. So we're going to see bumps from Devontae Freeman, Le'Veon Bell, Tyson Williams. I think that Devontae Freeman is the only guy you can really start because he's like the 1A, like kind of in this backfield. Dwayne, you kind of do a great job of laying out their utilization, and I love how you labeled it as gross across the board, because that's really what it is. Give the people your rundown on Devontae Freeman and why they feel like they're going to have to vomit when they put him in their starting lineup.
Yeah, it's just because it doesn't really matter who's active. They really just mostly they're splitting, right? So if you look at the last week where you had Latavius Murray out, 40% of the snaps, but this is for Freeman. 22% of the rushing attempts to Freeman, 28% to Le'Veon Bell, 11% to Williams, and the rest to where? Oh, the best player on the team, Lamar Jackson, who's really who they want to have the ball, in his hands. And then if you look at routes, under 30%. You look at targets, 8%. Targets per route run, they're okay, but it's just a situation where they're really going to split it up between the three backs. And you don't know that one of them could get a hot hand and get a little bit more carry than the others. But I don't know, Andrew, when I look at it, I see three backs that I have no confidence in, and an offense that's throwing the ball more, that really their RB1 is their quarterback. So I don't see any path to upside. I don't know what their floor is. Their floor, any one of these three players, their floor could be 0, and we wouldn't be surprised, right? They could give you 1 fantasy point. We'd be like, yeah, thanks. Like, that's awesome. Appreciate it. We knew that was within the range of outcomes. So I'm trying to avoid this backfield altogether.
Yep, agreed. The answer to the Ravens backfield is the passing game and Lamar Jackson. Like, that's what you want from this Ravens backfield. Chase Edmonds is dealing with a shoulder injury again. It looks like he's still going to play in this matchup, but we don't know. Just a lot of question marks about Arizona. I know that you have Edmonds still in your top 20, Dwayne. Is there any concern about him?
There is. Yeah, there is. Because if we look at his games where he was really more limited throughout the week and we had concerns, he did see a reduction in utilization, and we did see a reduction in fantasy points. So I do have him highlighted in yellow. I have not decided exactly where I'm going to get him to. My gut tells me right now I will move him down to tier 4, which includes Zach Moss, Melvin Gordon, Javonte Williams. More into that range is where I'm going to probably end up feeling more comfortable with Chase Edmonds when everything's said and done. I want to kind of hear the final of what they have to say today about Edmonds in practice. Arizona is one of the late West Coast teams, so we don't always get all of our information on all the players completely settled before we do this podcast. But yes, someone I'm definitely keeping an eye on, and that could give James Conner a little bit of an increase, but it's not a great matchup, right? It's middle of the road, running back strength of schedule, offensive line run blocking advantage versus the defensive line for the 49ers is it's well below average this week. So there's nothing screaming at me, oh my gosh, I need to have one of these Cardinal backs in my in my lineup. And if we are without Kyler Murray, that hurts the ground game as well. Like, he creates a lot of space for those guys. When it's more of a true one-up, you have a Colt McCoy under center, and it's just you're defending a typical running game. I think a lot of what we've seen from Arizona in an efficiency standpoint goes away with Colt McCoy under center.
Yeah, I think that if you don't have Kyler Murray, I think I'd prefer Edmonds because he'll probably be more involved in the passing game. They're probably won't be playing as with the lead and James Conner's been the touchdown guy. So either guy, I think I would probably try to get a receiver in there if I'm playing them in the flex. Just try to get more.
And Edmonds has been good from a receiving perspective.
Yeah.
Like, he's still in the top 5 backs in target share, like for running backs. So like he's still getting utilized in that part of his game. And I think that's a good call. I think you could see a guy like McCoy take a few more of those, especially if you're going to be without DeAndre Hopkins, and it looks pretty much like AJ Green won't play. And so Christian Kirk is really more of a, guy that you want to stretch the field vertically from the slot. He's probably going to have to work outside this week. Rondell Moore is really more around the line of scrimmage player. So you really could use potentially Chase Edmonds. Edmonds and Moore probably play similar roles tomorrow, to be honest, or tomorrow. Say tomorrow. When you guys listen, it will be tomorrow. Sunday.
Dump offs galore from Colt McCoy, the Texas
Colt McCoy
legend.
loves a good dump off.
Damien
That's
Williams.
Jamal Charles.
Damien Williams did not practice on Thursday or Friday. With David Montgomery's like potentially coming off of IR, he's practicing. You can drop Damien Williams, I think, at this point. I agree. It's pretty clear. Herbert's the backup when David Montgomery returns. He won that job, outright. So you can drop Damien Williams. It's just good.
I prefer to avoid Herbert though this weekend, just because it is the absolute worst. It's a 0 out of 10 on our running back strength of schedule. And it's just like, what are you playing for? I mean, you got a total of 40 in this game. How is this possible, Andrew? An implied points of 16.75. Like that. Okay. Like, why even show up? The Bears
because
are not
volume is
points.
King, Dwayne. And Khalil Herbert did get it done against Tampa Bay because they just refused to stop running the ball. And if he's the only running back active, really, and it's him and Ryan Nall, then Herbert can grind his way to like 8 fantasy
Yeah, I know
points.
running back is king, and I still would avoid him if I can this weekend. Like, there's some matchups I just don't want anything to do with. Pittsburgh is definitely one of them against the running game. It's also a 0 on the offensive line run blocking advantage. So if you look, if my spreadsheet in front of me were a Christmas tree, Khalil Herbert would represent the red strand that I'm wrapping around. He has 0 green anywhere. He does have the volume, to your point, Andrew. And we're projecting him right now, I think, for like 15 to 20 total touches on the site, if I remember correctly, because I was just looking at it earlier, somewhere in that range. And I do think he'll get those touches. But folks, because he's a low-end RB2 this week. I've got him at 22.
Agreed. Elijah Mitchell is questionable with a rib injury. So this is something he was dealing with earlier in the season, and it gets a little more complicated now that Jeff Wilson is also potentially making his return off the PUP for the first time, making his seasonal debut. Now, it's tough for us to just kind of assume that, okay, Jeff Wilson's going to come in and now play this significant role, because Elijah Mitchell has been really effective. Like, he's been one of the best running backs, one of the best rookies this year. He's actually second in rushing yards behind Najee Harris, and he's played significantly less games than Harris has. So are you ready to move Mitchell at all, just kind of like as you expect Wilson to be more involved? Or you're like, hey, I got to wait and see. Like, they may not use Jeff Wilson at all, maybe, and it still will be the Elijah Mitchell show. Or does this rib injury make it seem more likely that they probably will incorporate Wilson and Mitchell will not just be the early down back the entire time?
I think the rib injury is the key. I think if it's a situation where he's having to play through pain, they may want to ease his load a little bit. But I think he's played well enough that I'm not necessarily scared of Jeff Wilson. Yes, we've seen Jeff Wilson come in and have some big games and probably won some folks some leagues, in little short spurts. But I think overall, what we've seen from Mitchell, he gives them the explosive play ability that they're really looking for. Like, if you look at Elijah Mitchell, if you look at running backs that have at least 50 attempts on the season, explosive runs, which are carries of 10 yards or more, he's first in the NFL at 18.5% of his rushing plays go for 10 yards or more. So that's that Shanahan, zone blocking scheme coming together with the talent that Mitchell has. He's not necessarily the best from a vision standpoint, but when he does get it right, he gets it right in a really big way, which I think they like. And that's not something that Jeff Wilson brings to the table. Honestly, Jeff Wilson, the better comp for Jeff Wilson is Trey Sermon. Right. So I really don't think you should, sweat it a bunch. I do think Jeff Wilson potentially makes Trey Sermon just a flat out drop because they seem to just not like Trey Sermon at all. And then I think from there, we just kind of have to play it by ear, Andrew. If all of a sudden, even this week, if we see Jeff Wilson get a few attempts, I wouldn't get too concerned because it really could be tied back to the injury. Now, if it's a fully healthy week and we see Jeff Wilson working in, because we know JaMychal Hasty is already the passing down back, and he's also been getting all the short down distance. So I will say Mitchell's margins are pretty thin because he's living on the big play right now. He cannot afford to give up any portion of his early down work. He needs to retain all of that because Hasty is already the back that's going to get used quite a bit if they get into these trailing scripts.
Yep. And maybe this is a time, try to sell high on Elijah Mitchell before the week gets
I think that's actually good actionable advice from you. I think maybe I would be willing to sell high. But when we say sell high, I always worry, because I get the screenshots later of, hey man, I got rid of Elijah Mitchell for, James Conner and Devontae Booker. Like, that's not what we mean. Like, what we mean is find somebody that's hyped about Elijah Mitchell. Right. And, and go use the data points we're giving you to go sell him. Elijah Mitchell is leading the whole league.
Yeah,
and
he's not a bad player. Like, he's been good. Like, you got to sell good players to get good players back. But
exactly.
Yeah.
But get a good player back. Like, if you want to go make it, like, say if you needed a receiver really bad and somebody's just still not a buyer on Hollywood Brown, like, I would trade Elijah Mitchell for a player like that. Don't just don't get rid of him to get rid of him.
I might make that trade later today, Dwayne. I appreciate that Marquise Brown point. I love that.
People are just still too low on him. Everybody's sitting around just like, oh, Rashad Bateman. And we like Bateman, but I'm like, dude, Marquise Brown was also a first-round pick. He can do things Bateman can't, like just beat both safeties flat out. Like, and we love Bateman. But Marquise Brown, and he's been playing, with Lamar Jackson for 3 years. I won't get on that soapbox. We can talk about that when we get to receivers if we want. But yeah, the sentiment is too low on Hollywood Brown for how good he's playing.
Yeah. And also, be sure to make sure Jeff Wilson's not on your waiver wire. Like, pick him up because if Elijah Mitchell re-injures his rib, Jeff Wilson's probably going to be the next guy, and we're going to be talking about him on the waiver wire show next week, where we Jeff Wilson. Make sure you just pick him up now, stash him. I think if he's still on. Let
me ask you this, Andrew. Sorry to cut you off. Would you rather just carry Wilson and drop Trey Sermon?
Yeah,
I think I would too. Just because I think we've seen from Sermon and as much as we may like Sermon and I liked when I watched Sermon. I don't know everything that's going on with him now, but I think at this point, what I do know is the coaches, for whatever reason, do not like Trey Sermon. And that's all that I need to know.
Yep. And unfortunately, when you don't get the volume, it doesn't matter how good you are at the running back position. So the talent may still be there. So don't write him off. He's still a rookie, but right now he's not seeing any opportunities. So you need those to be getting fantasy points. Last running back note, Justin Jackson's out for the Chargers. So it means we're probably going to see more of Larry Roundtree just as the backup, but it's Austin Eckler's show. He's in a great spot this week. So he's a guy you want to pay up for in DFS. Before we get into the next segment, I want to give a shout out to our friends at Fantrax. Fantrax free fantasy football league manager is the most customizable, easy to use, and feature-rich platform in the entire industry. PFF playing our leagues on Fantrax this season, so you can set up your league exactly the way you want. You want to get rid of kickers and DST. You want to add more flex spots, complete multi-team trades, or even be able to trade fab or future year picks. Fantrax can do it all for free. For your fantasy hockey and fantasy basketball fans, the season is fast approaching, so be sure to create a new league or bring over those existing leagues to Fantrax. They're giving away signed jerseys to a few lucky fans, so sign up now at fantrax.com/PFF to be eligible. Wide receivers are now coming in. Debo Samuel dealing with a calf injury. He's been limited this week. He's entering questionable. Debo's been just an absolute monster this year. Been one of the best receiver values you've got. And draft him around 7. He's a top 3 wide receiver in fantasy, dominating the target share in the 49ers offense. But now we have Kittle likely coming back. Brandon Ayuk is starting to get used more. He's actually getting positive coach speak for the first time all year from Kyle Shanahan. He's finally seen that he's taking a step forward. Is it time to try to sell Debo? The matchup here is pretty good against the Arizona Cardinals. He's getting the volume. Do you expect the volume to continue to be there for him, or do you start to see things start to decline a little bit with Debo? You're going to start him in this matchup if he's healthy, obviously, but long-term outlook on Debo for the rest of the season.
He was getting the volume before when we had Kittle. So I'm really not that worried about Debo. I mean, I have a little concern, Andrew, because we did see Brandon Ayuk have his season high in utilization last week, out there for almost 100% of the routes, actually, which is a huge step for him. Had 27% of the targets. I think the bigger issue is really for him with Kittle coming back. But if Ayuk truly has turned the corner, and then you are getting Kittle back and he stays healthy, and you're in a run first offense, obviously, like you'd have to have some thought, right, around Debo potentially, running into issues here or there. And really Debo's kryptonite, let's be honest, it's really been injuries.
Mm-hmm.
So we've not got to see a lot of the Niners offense over the last 2 years of all of these guys fully healthy together. Like, so we don't know for sure. It's not like we've got this big, it's not like we've got a big sample that we can go back and look at and say, look, this is what we think exactly is going to happen. Overall, I do believe they're designing it a lot for Debo. I think they still prefer him to Brandon Ayuk. Yes, Brandon Ayuk is getting to play more, but obviously Debo has been rewarding them with their faith in him like all season long. So right now it's a situation where I don't mind selling high on a player like Debo. Just like what we were talking about with Mitchell, but make sure you sell sky high. I mean, we're talking about a receiver that's in the top 3. So, you've got to approach that trade table with confidence, and you treat Debo like he is the wide receiver 3 whenever you talk about making a trade. Don't think, oh, really, he's wide receiver 24 performing as wide receiver 3. I think then you're making a mistake. I would consider him a low-end wide receiver 1, which is where I have him ranked for the rest of the season, just based on a few of these, just being, pragmatic about it, right? And taking all the information in and trying to look at it, zoom out, big picture. Okay, probably belongs like somewhere between 9 and 12 when you take all the factors in. But don't treat him like he's a low end wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3, something like that. Make sure that you're getting good value for him.
Dallas Cowboys wide receivers are a little bit banged up. Amari Cooper should be fine. He's been dealing with like a hamstring injury kind of like all season. He's had a couple limited practice, but he's expected to play. Lamb is the one that kind of came up a little bit scarier this week. He had an ankle injury, a sprained ankle come up midweek. Mike McCarthy said that he expects him to play, expects him to practice, and he's not concerned. Is it concerned you at all? Obviously, you follow the Cowboys very closely. Have you moved them?
Yeah, anytime you go from a full practice to a DNP, like, you catch my attention. But McCarthy is saying all the right things. He said he expected Lamb, to practice, today. We haven't gotten the official, report. I haven't even seen if it was limited. We just know that he practiced. I don't know to what capacity yet. But he's saying he expects them to play. So I'm going to roll with it. If you've got CD Lamb, you're going to just continue on unless we get different kind of news tomorrow.
Yep. And just if you're afraid about a bummed ankle, Cortland Sutton had a bummed ankle 1 week on a Friday,
Exactly.
And he went out and caught like 150 receiving yards. And I felt dumb because I moved down the rankings. So yes, these are Warriors guys. Most of them are not playing 100% ever. So CD Lamb is a guy he's not leaving my.
And Lamb's just in a good spot. Like, he's from a wide receiver strength of schedule to 7.2 out of 10. So that's a well above average grade. That's going to be top 10 for the week. Wide receiver cornerback matchup is a plus 60. So, I mean, that's going to be well above average for the week. You're in a game where you got an implied points of 29.75. That was as of yesterday. It may be a little bit different today, but it'll be somewhere right around there for Dallas. So, I mean, you've got a top 4 implied points. You probably got a top 10 wide receiver strength of schedule matchup. You probably got a top 15 to top 20 wide receiver cornerback matchup from an elite young talent. You're just going to roll with it.
Yep. And, Dallas is probably going to play. They're going to be able to control this game. And, I think they're going to be able to feature the running backs a lot. So if you want to fade away from Lamb and Cooper and DFS, I think maybe they're more of a tournament play because they'll be low roster. But I mean, if the double stack Dak Prescott is low roster, you want to be over that.
Oh, so with
Lamb and
that.
Cooper. DeAndre Hopkins, I know we've got a lot of questions about him in the chat. I know we kind of hit on him a little bit with Kyler Murray, but DNP Thursday, limited Friday, he basically didn't play. He played like 25% of the game last Thursday. So it's been almost 10 days that they're going to suit up. I have no confidence in playing Hopkins, even if he plays. I really don't think he's going to play in this game. I mean, he was barely playing the last game, and it's been so long he's not practicing. Where are you at with Hopkins? Do you feel like he's a wide receiver 2 this week? Wide receiver 3? Like, what's your
man? It's another player that I've got highlighted. In the way our process works, at least the way I run mine throughout the week. He's probably going to move down to wide receiver 3 status. I have him at wide receiver 20 right now. but I just don't see a way that I can keep him there, just because there's just some other players that I really like this week that I think need to be ahead of him, given what we're talking about here. Hopkins has been a warrior. He is a player that we have seen multiple times, Andrew, have the DNP all week and play. He did it again last week. But the problem is, when you're dealing with a hamstring, as what we saw in week 8, it's something that can flare up at any moment. Now, it was kind of weird because Hopkins doesn't get a lot of those big plays down the field, which is really where he had to open it up, and that's what caused the re-injury. Really, he's more of the intermediate, possession type receiver. He does get some run after the catch, but he can kind of protect himself. That play, I think, kind of stretched him past, really what his limits could handle with the injury last week. But still, I'm going to move him down probably to wide receiver 3 status. If I can avoid him, I'm with you, especially with the chance that what if Kyler doesn't play? I don't know. I'm not feeling it, this week with DeAndre Hopkins, which says a lot. Like, he's a guy that, I've kind of stuck with and told folks, like, look, the target shares and everything, yeah, they're a little bit lower than what they were last year, but he's still really leading this team. And if you took away the couple of games that he had played hurt before last week, like, his target share was like 27 or 28%, which was still great. Yeah, it wasn't 30%, but 28 is like, we'll take 28%. The bigger issue had been all the leading scripts for the Cardinals. But yeah, I agree. This week, I would like to move him down. I want to avoid him if I can, just because, the hamstring thing, I really worry he's going to re-aggravate it even if he plays.
Yeah, and I don't think that benching DeAndre Hopkins, by no means you're going to miss out on a monster. This doesn't seem like a smash spot for really the Cardinals passing game. I mean, if you look at Hopkins this year, he's really been doing it because of efficiency. So you take away his quarterback efficiency, like, it's not going to be the same. So he would need to get more volume to make up for not having Kyler potentially, and that just seems unlikely. So with Hopkins kind of banged up, now where does this have you on Christian Kirk and Rondale Moore? Now, would you start those guys over Hopkins? Like, I have Hopkins. Do I play a banged-up Hopkins if he's active? Do I make sure I pick up Rondale Moore and Christian Kirk as a safety plan so I can just like kind of slide them in? Because if those are the two active guys, because AJ Green is also not going to play in this game because he has COVID, we're going to see a full snap share from Rondale Moore, which has kind of been his biggest issue, is just not being on the field enough. And that now shouldn't be a problem based on the fact that they're going to be out 2 of their top wide receivers.
I would expect Rondale Moore to still be around 60 to 70% of the routes, just because he didn't really replace, which is still good, right? The problem is he's been stuck down in that 30 to 40% range. But we did see him get up to 70% after Hopkins left that game. But he's not the direct replacement, right, for DeAndre Hopkins. It's just more about, like, really that game was a situation where finally you had the Cardinals trailing. They needed to use 10 personnel more than what they had normally done. Then you had some of the injuries going on, and it worked out perfectly for Rondale Moore. The player that I would expect to see on the field, probably 100% of snaps nearly, would be Christian Kirk if you have AJ Green and DeAndre Hopkins out. And then you'll get Rondale Moore maybe up around 60 to 70%, and I do think that makes them both playable. I would utilize Christian Kirk over DeAndre Hopkins. I would put Rondale Moore versus DeAndre Hopkins more at a coin flip, but I wouldn't blame anyone that has decided they're going to go ahead and play Moore. I mean, you've got to look at your matchup. The way I would look at it is what you said. Like, you're probably not going to get a blow up game from Hopkins, but he could still give you a little bit of a better floor if they just utilize him more as like the intermediate, underneath kind of, hey, 7 to 10 yard A-dot player, need him on a third down, get him the ball. Like, you could see like a floor game of 3 catches for 40 yards, right, for Hopkins, where Moore's floor is probably still lower, but I would say Moore's ceiling is going to be higher because he could hit the explosive play.
Yep. And I think Christian Kirk, because Green is basically already out, like Christian Kirk is already, like, you can feel pretty decent about playing him regardless of whatever happens with Hopkins. He's healthy, and he should see a solid amount of targets without AJ Green.
And he's shown the ability to, he can boom. Like, he can hit the big plays. So you all of a sudden get him a little bit more volume. Like, I've got him at wide receiver 32 right now. He'll probably push up he'll be just outside of wide receiver 2 range by the time I'm done with my ranks.
Yeah. So I'm there with starting Kirk over DeAndre Hopkins, unless we hear anything different about his situation. Robert Woods did not practice Thursday, limited Friday. McVay says he will play. I think it's a similar thing with Stafford, so I'm not worried about these Rams guys. I mean, Robert Woods has been up and down, but he plays on
it could be a small upgrade for Jefferson. If we know Woods is playing through some things, just because Van Jefferson has played so well and has shown an ability to beat press coverage, all these different kind of things. Like, he's a true I think Van Jefferson's like on the verge. Like he just needs the opportunity, right? You got so many mouths to feed, and an offense that doesn't get to run a ton of plays just because they score damn touchdowns every other play. Like they can't even stay on the field because they're so good.
Yeah.
So Jefferson, I may give him a slight bump, but yeah, I wouldn't really change a lot around the Rams other than potentially thinking about Van and like a tournament lineup.
Well, I mean, I know that as someone that has a lot of Bucks receivers, like I'm starting Van Jefferson in like Chris Godwin's place or Mike Evans' place, and I feel pretty good about it. Like the Titans are a good matchup. So if you are looking for a waiver wire pickup, like let's say Christian Kirk is not available and you need to pick up Van Jefferson for Hopkins, like I like that, especially because Van Jefferson also plays in the late games. So you can get as much information about Hopkins as you need. So Van Jefferson remains a solid pickup because he's got a solid matchup. Julio Jones is off the injury report. So he's going to play. Unfortunately, A.J. Brown is on the injury report with a knee injury. Now, this dynamic changes a little bit because A.J. Brown, we thought might see more of Jalen Ramsey if Julio Jones wasn't playing. But now I don't think we're going to see Ramsey shadow either of them unless one of them gets knocked out. So the matchup is still like, the Rams give up points to wide receivers. They're not shutting everyone down because Ramsey can't cover everybody. So is it just you just kind of start Julio and A.J. Brown and just hope that they gut it through? A.J. Brown's a warrior, man.
Yeah. A.J. Brown, you're playing no matter what, and his target shares are nearly 30% every week. We're probably going to get a little more passing volume. Efficiency could come down without Derrick Henry. TBD, we'll have to see on that, right? Play action still works regardless, but when you don't have the king on the field, I happen to think that there will be a little bit, of a difference. This is the ultimate test of running backs don't matter. Like I have never seen, like we say this all the time. Oh, this is the new ultimate. This is the ultimate of all ultimate test of running backs don't matter is right here with King Henry. And what I want to see is like, I want to see Tennessee using similar formations to what they did before. Like, do they see more or less stacked boxes? My guess is they're going to see less in similar formations. And they're really going to basically say, okay, look, we're just going to take the big play away. We're not going to let A.J. Brown beat us. So that does open the door for Julio to step forward. My problem with Julio, though, is we've already seen this year, Andrew, where he's all of a sudden got back healthy, got taken off the injury report. We've seen him have a full week of practice and then just retweak things. So Julio, I think, is a gamble just because I do still think there's an injury risk with him, despite the fact that he's been moved off of the injury report. We don't know how much of that is gamesmanship just by a team that knows they're down weapons. Coaches do this crap all the time. So we shouldn't kid ourselves and think that they're really just being truly honest about these injuries. There's a huge window of what limited means, right? So anyway, but it is good news that he's off the injury report. I personally don't think I'm going to move Julio up my ranks much, though. I've got him at 39 right now. He might get up to like 33, 34, 35, somewhere in there. So maybe I squeeze him into low-end wide receiver 3 range. But he's not a player that I really trust in a big way. The person I'm most concerned about is I just want to hear that A.J. Brown's playing. That's all I really care about now with the Titans.
It's weird because he seems like he always misses practice because of this knee injury. I know, like last year, he never practiced at all. So I think that he'll be okay, but I mean, just be prepared in case.
I think they're playing games right now. Like I think Julio is probably less healthy than we think. And look, I don't have anything to back this up, folks. So don't just be like, oh, well, Dwayne said this. But just knowing that they lost Derrick Henry, right? It makes sense from a narrative standpoint. And A.J. Brown's probably ready to rock. And so they're just trying to create some sort of confusion around how do they want to handle it. And not that it is, as soon as the Rams see A.J. Brown on the field, they're not going to care. That's who they're going to gravitate to at first. And then they'll adjust like as the game goes.
Cole Beasley has been playing banged up the last couple of weeks, or excuse me, this week. DNP on Thursday, limited on Friday. I think that just means that this is going to be an Emmanuel Sanders game. Like last week, it was a Cole Beasley game. He got banged up. Emmanuel Sanders goose-egged. And now I think they just reverse roles. I mean, we've seen Beasley, his production, ebbed and flow basically all year long. Like he's had big games. He's had not big games where he's been non-factor. Seems like if he's banged up and playing in this game, he's probably not going to be a huge factor against the Jags. So I move Beasley down significantly. I know that he's played through injuries before, and he usually doesn't play very well when he is banged up. So Beasley, I actually don't think you really want to play him. Gabriel Davis obviously gets a massive bump if Beasley is inactive. Do you agree with that with Davis?
Well, I think the thing I would add with Beasley is we've really seen him, and I spoke about this in the utilization report probably 3 or 4 weeks ago, is that really Dawson Knox was kind of the wet blanket, on some of these other options, which were Beasley and Gabriel Davis, and they were using more 12 personnel. There's a lot of different things going on, but since Dawson Knox has been out, has really been when we've seen Beasley go nuts. But I think, you are correct as far as Beasley playing through injuries versus not. He's always a risk, I think. Most players are a risk, but I have seen with Beasley that it is a little bit of more of a problem right now. I still got him at wide receiver 29, but he's another player that I've got highlighted to really, like, once I have all the injury news from the day, to go back and rework my ranks. So my guess is he falls to the bottom, probably of wide receiver 3 range. I like the call on Emmanuel Sanders. Like, everything has still been great for him, Andrew. Like, the utilization, everything has been there. The routes, he was getting nice end zone targets, seeing plenty of deep looks. So they play two totally different roles, but it's the Jaguars. So you get the second best wide receiver strength of schedule on the slate for Emmanuel Sanders, and really Stephon Diggs for all the Buffalo receivers. But I think Emmanuel Sanders probably gets a big one this weekend, and has a shot at 100 yards and a touchdown.
Henry Ruggs obviously was released. This isn't really like technically an injury, but I just want to hit on it real quickly. Is there anyone that you think benefits the most? Again, Zay Jones will probably take over the snaps per se from Henry Ruggs. Renfro has a good matchup in the slot against the Giants slot funnel defense. Darren Waller is going to be playing. Brian Edwards will be out on the outside. Did you move up anyone significantly because Ruggs was out, besides putting Zay Jones kind of just in the player pool, kind of?
Yeah, I didn't even put Zay Jones in because I've seen Zay Jones for long enough. Now, Zay Jones, they're saying he's replacing Ruggs at the X position. But if you look at, at the Z position, and the only thing that was Z about Ruggs was that he got to line up off the line. But his routes were more of an X type, route tree, right? He was running the deep overs, the posts, the skinny posts, the go routes, all that. Zay Jones is not going to do that. Zay Jones is not, really a deep threat. So I think if anyone is going to step forward, it has to be Edwards, but I don't really trust it because Edwards is more of a jump ball, contested catch kind of player, not a just beat you with flat out speed and get over the top. And what we've seen from Derek Carr and his evolution as a deep ball passer over the last 2 years is that's what he likes. He likes the receivers that can separate and be open. He can anticipate, get the ball out early, and he's been really accurate in those situations. So I don't see Edwards really being that guy. And we'll see. I think I gave Edwards a very small bump, but I don't think anyone in the offense gets a huge bump here, Andrew. I think, really Hunter Renfrow plays a specific role. He's in the slot. He's working underneath. You've got Darren Waller getting to work inside against the linebackers and safeties. He's going to continue to be, a complete target hog. He's still a buy low. So if you folks, if you've got a queasy Darren Waller owner, you got a great matchup this week for him. He should get back on track. But I don't think there's anyone that directly replaces Henry Ruggs' targets. I think they're going to need to look outside of the building to try to find someone that can stretch the field.
Bring back John Brown. Devontae Parker is out. He's been ruled out. He's had a setback. He's actually headed to IR, which is, when he's been playing, he's been underrated, but unfortunately the injuries have plagued him once again. No Will Fuller either. So yeah, it's wheels up. Jalen Waddle, Mike Gesicki. I guess, how high are you on Jalen Waddle this week, Dwayne? I know I had to move him up my rankings. I think that I have him right now at wide receiver 16. I feel pretty good about that. I want people to make sure that they're starting him. What's Waddle's ceiling here?
Well, I already had him at 22 before this news. So, I don't know that I'll move him up a bunch because, if I have somebody in my top 24, they typically, if someone's reading my rankings, they're going to start them. But I think 16 is fine and dandy. I think it looks great. Like, when you look at Jalen Waddle, it's just the utilization thing, man. Like, they love him. Yeah, they were not, people overreact too much to 1 week. Right. Well, I hear all the, they were just not on the same page last week. Yeah, but they were the week before. And then they were the week before that. So with Jalen Waddle, all you care is that he's continuing to get the targets. He continues to get to work inside from the slot. Yeah, we'd like to see a few more deep shots with that speed. But at the end of the day, if you're having these games where you're getting between 8 and 12 targets and you're a first-round talent at receiver, you're going to be fine. And so I love Jalen Waddle.
Awesome. Kenny Golladay is questionable. So Giants wide receivers, of course, we have a plethora of injuries. Kadarius Toney was actually taken off the injury report. So I like him a lot. I think that he's going to lead the team in targets. That's what he's done whenever he's been healthy. He has the highest target rate per route run among receivers over the last 4 weeks. So Daniel Jones is always looking his way. I would not start Golladay just because I don't know how healthy he's going to be, the risk of re-injury, and him and Daniel Jones have just not really been on the same page. So I think it's a wait and see kind of game with him. And the matchup's also not great. The Raiders have actually kind of been an underrated pass coverage defense this year. So I think Toney is the only guy I would start. Ross is questionable. Pettis was placed on injured reserve, and Darius Slayton is just, he's healthy, but he's not very good. So, that's kind of my breakdown of the Giants. Any other thoughts, Dwayne?
No, man, I think you nailed it. The good thing with Toney is it's not a lower body injury, right? Because, man, like if you guys go back and watch him, like I've watched every snap, like when his lower body is right, like running the routes they want him to do, like he's really hard to cover. Not a huge hands catcher anyway. So even though he's got this injury to his hand, like with a lot of the routes he runs, like they can just put it on him quickly. He can kind of body catch it and do his run after the catch thing. He's not like this huge, like not that he can't do this, but a lot of the routes he runs, he doesn't require like this full extension as long as the pass is accurate. So I really do like Toney. I think that's a good call. And I'm going to go let my dog out real quick while you start this next team because she's barking.
All right, keep going. All right, so Jarvis Landry was removed from the injury report from a knee injury. Odell Beckham Jr. has been released. So, you're going to want to start Jarvis Landry all over the place. I actually like his line over on prizepicks.com. You're getting an extra prop from the prophet himself today. Jarvis Landry, 46.5 receiving yards. You want to pound the over on that because it's just simply too low. He has a 28% target share over the last 2 weeks since he's been healthy. No OBJ. Peoples-Jones, like these other guys have just been not involved. So whether it's Peoples-Jones, whether it's Anthony Schwartz, Rashard Higgins, like you're not playing any of these players. I don't even really like any of them in DFS. They're cheap, but the Browns just kind of rotate this cast of characters. They're going to use their tight ends. Like, and honestly, it would surprise me if we see like a weird David Njoku like big game because it just happens randomly at times, and there's no OBJ, so maybe it will be an Njoku blow-up spot. But it's Jarvis Landry here, and that's really it.
Yeah, right, Landry, like his targets, like when you've had these games, without Odell Beckham Jr., like it's pretty insane. Like now you got to remember that this is a run-heavy, offense. So it's not like a situation where you're like, oh, I'm talking about an offense that drops back and throws the ball like, 80, drop backs to pass 80% of the time. Like that's not what we're talking about. But like he's pretty much around 30% of the targets like every single week. And he has these huge weeks where he jumps up to like 40%. So even though it's a situation where it's not a huge ADOT, all those sort of things, it's enough that it does make Landry, it gets him in the wide receiver 3 conversation. But just here are his targets, Andrew, his target shares in 2020 in the 2020 postseason and then week 1 this year in games where we haven't had Odell Beckham Jr. 42%, 29, 11, 41, 32, 18, 28, 20, 25, 31, 24. So he's pretty much a lock for like somewhere between 25 and 30% of the targets. He could give you one of these big weeks, where he sees the 40%. If he scores a touchdown, and has 7 receptions, he can give you a nice week. But the thing with Landry, I like it. He just gives you a good floor, right? You're not really aiming for the huge ceiling game with Landry, but he gives you a nice floor. You're probably looking at 5 catches for 50 yards no matter what. They could turn into 7 for 100 and a touchdown, like if everything goes really well.
Moving to the Ravens wide receivers. So I know we've talked about hyping up Marquise Brown, and it looks like he could just be in a total smash spot, especially because some of the other Ravens receivers are a little bit banged up. So Sammy Watkins is questionable after coming off the bye week. So that's always kind of a concern. You always hope that a guy off a bye week is healthy, and Watkins has had some limited practices, so he has a chance to play, according to John Harbaugh. Rashad Bateman had a groin injury. This was a new injury. He did not practice Friday. John Harbaugh said there's nothing serious, and he has a good chance to play on Sunday. So maybe this is kind of like a Terry McLaurin thing where, it was just a precautionary, hey, let's just, he doesn't practice. He's fine. Game time decision, despite the Harbaugh optimism. You're not playing Sammy Watkins anyway. I think that in DFS, this is really a important call. So just pay attention to the injury report on Bateman because he's really cheap and he's a guy that you want to stack with Lamar Jackson. So I'm still going to probably look to play Bateman. Just pay attention to the news. I guess those would probably shy me away from Bateman in season-long leagues. He was kind of on the back-end fringe anyway as like a wide receiver 3. Dwayne, do you feel any different about Bateman or Watkins?
Well, the scary thing with Bateman is it is the groin, which is what had already kept him out, right? So you don't want to see a re-injury to, the issue that really plagued him early on in the season. So that does worry me a little bit. So we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, I agree. I mean, here's the thing. What we need is a data point where we've got Sammy Watkins and Rashad Bateman both healthy, and we see how they treat it, right? I fully expect, Marquise Brown to see his routes and his snaps no matter what. I fully expect Mark Andrews to see his snaps and his routes no matter what. What I don't know is what they're going to do with Sammy Watkins and Bateman once they're both healthy, and we kind of need that data point.
Yeah, so I think it's probably – you can probably wait and see a little bit, especially if they are both playing, then, maybe we really need one of them out. If they're – maybe they may cannibalize each other a little bit, so probably an avoid in season-long leagues. Yeah. Jalen Reagor's going to play. Sorry, Quez Watkins, you're not going to be able to be started anywhere. Terrace Marshall Jr. is back. Calvin Ridley was placed on the NFI list, so try to get him on your IR spot. I know I have Ridley in one league, and I need to talk to the commissioner and be like, hey, can I put him on my IR spot? Because he's not playing. So really hoping that works out. I'm not looking forward to that conversation because the commissioner can be a little bit uptight in that particular league. Michael Thomas is out for the rest of the season, and Tyrod.
Do we need to bring this commissioner on the show, Andrew?
And Tyrod Williams was waived from an injury settlement. I know Dwayne thinks that means Odell Beckham is going to the
That's tongue in cheek, but that would be funny. That would be funny. Here's the problem for Beckham, right? Just real quick. All the teams that have access to him, where he could actually get playing time, he's going to hate playing for. And then the teams where if he could get past that group of bad teams, he's probably in a situation where he's not going to get the playing time that he wants. So, when you look at that waiver order, it's really not good for Odell Beckham Jr. I don't know if you see a spot on there that you're like, oh, that's the spot where I want him to land. That's reasonable given the order that we're seeing. When I look at it, I'm like, man, he is not going to be happy no matter what happens here.
Well, I don't know where Odell Beckham is going to end up landing, but you can bet on it. Yeah, DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL, has you covered. So new customers can bet just $5 on any NFL team to win their game, and if they do, you win $200 in free bets. If Sportsbooks isn't available in your state yet, DraftKings won't leave you empty-handed. Everyone can play for huge cash prizes all season long with DraftKings Daily Fantasy Sports Contests. DraftKings is giving all new customers a free shot at millions of dollars in total prizes with their first deposit. Download the DraftKings Sportsback app now. Use promo code PFF. Bet just $5 on any NFL team to win their game and win $200,000 in free bets. If they win, you win with promo code PFF this week at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. You must be 21 or older. NG, Indianapolis, or Pennsylvania only. New customers only. Minimum $5 deposit and $1 wager required. One per customer. Restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. All right, Dwayne, tight ends to wrap us up here. Noah Fant is out with COVID. Albert O, or as I'm going to call his last name because it's Albert Okwuegbunam, because I know that the man had gotten no respect on his name all week long from the fantasy football touts because we're all just too lazy to learn his last name. That's it. Albert O is a lock in DFS at 2,600. He's going to see, above a 50% snap share. That's what he's been playing. Under that, and he's already been productive.
Yeah, he could get to 80% of the routes, which is the number you're looking for. And his targets per route run have actually already been really strong. So I think he has a really nice shot to basically just take over the Noah Fant role that we had seen for the few weeks before whenever you had Alberto out. So yes, I think that he is let's see. He was limited again. So we got to make sure from an injury perspective, but he's been limited. He's probably fine.
Yeah. So, and also if you need a tight end this week, you're streaming tight end, Alberto is a good option in season long leagues as well.
I have him in my top 12. So
yeah. So he's in a really good spot. George Kittle is expected to return. So he is playing this week. The matchup is brutal. Arizona Cardinals have been the best matchup against tight ends. Probably doesn't matter too much because it is George Kittle. And if you have him, you probably have just been streaming tight ends anyway. So are you just putting Kittle back into your lineup, Dwayne, or if you've had a streamer?
Just putting him in.
All right.
There's no streamer I'm starting over George Kittle.
I cannot disagree with you there. You're not going to get as much upside. The only tight end I really like the most probably streaming is Tyler Conklin. I think that he's in a really good spot this week. But
he is. But even then, I'm using Kittle over him all day.
Yeah, no, will not argue with that. Kittle definitely has more upside than a Tyler Conklin. Dawson Knox is out, so Tommy Sweeney is a deeper streamer. Again, he ran a route on 76% of Josh Allen's dropbacks in week 8. So it's really great usage from a tight end. I liked him a lot in DFS. He's at 3,100. So for some reason, we lose Albert O as an option. If he's ruled out, look for Tommy Sweeney. Tyler Conklin's also 3K. So he's another one of these punt tight ends that you can look for. Ebron did not practice on Thursday, limited on Friday. Pat Freiermuth, I honestly doesn't think it really matters if Ebron plays or not. Again, it's probably ideal, but we saw the other tight end, Gentry, also play a decent amount.
But Pat not quite as much. Like their utilization, we do want Freiermuth, to be without Ebron, in my opinion. We did see Gentry play, to your point, but it was much more of an even split when we had Ebron. Last week we saw Freiermuth get up, towards 70% of the routes, which that gets you into the streaming conversation. You don't want to be down around 50%.
Yeah. So Freiermuth, definitely want to add him, stash him because he is getting targets, which is obviously a good indication. When you get targets, you usually get to play more. So if Ebron is ultimately ruled out, then I think that Freiermuth is in a good spot, but they do play on Monday night. So again, Tyler Conklin is still probably my favorite streamer. So I would probably just pick him up and start him if I need a tight end. Blake Jarwin is out. So I think Dalton Schultz remains a top 12 tight end. I know that he didn't have a great week last week, but he still had the targets. And he has a connection with Dak. That's when he's been the most productive. So Cooper Rush under center, maybe that's why it didn't really work out for Dalton Schultz. And then Farrell Brown did not practice on Friday. So Jordan Akins, maybe we'll get a couple targets. Who knows? It doesn't matter. You're not starting him. I played him in DFS last week. He got 10 points, and I was actually thrilled about it. So Jordan Akins continues to live on. I am a Jordan Akins truther. So in those 16-team, 2 tight end leagues, Jordan Akins is your guy. Any other notes on tight ends, Dwayne?
No, man. I think we're good.
All right. Before we get into the favorite parts, offensive line and defense, whether it's football success or financial savvy, the right questions help set the stage for winning strategies. Western and Southern is teaming up with PFF's very own Chris Collinsworth to share insights that can help you put you ahead on both your fantasy and financial scoreboards. Want to hear about Chris's old playing days or behind the scenes with Allen's Sunday Night Football? How about a need to know for your financial future? Now you can ask about either or both. And every football or financial question you ask earns you a chance to win a catered party for February's big game. Check out the Chris Collinsworth podcast and Western and Southern's Instagram for answers to the best questions each week. Submit your questions at westernsouthern.com/askchris. One more time, that is westernsouthern.com/askchris. If you're watching on YouTube, check out the link in the description below. Remember, with Western and Southern, you can rest assured on game day. Now back to the podcast as we wrap up here. Offensive line, Garrett Bradbury, center for the Minnesota Vikings, out with COVID. Bills right tackle Spencer Brown is out, and Tyron Smith for the Dallas Cowboys is also out at the tackle position. Not too many actionable items there. It's really cluster injuries at offensive line that gets you concerned. Tyron Smith has been, obviously it's ideal, but I think Dak Prescott is still going to be okay. So I would not be overly concerned about either of the offensive line issues. At the defense, the Vikings defense is just banged up all over the place. Michael Pierce, Daniel Hunter, Patrick Peterson out. Cameron Dantzler, Anthony Barr questionable. So we talked about these Ravens offense, and you just want to start your Ravens guys. They're all going to be putting up points. Love them in DFS. Lamar Jackson should be a cash game play without Taysom Hill. So you want to play as many Ravens as you really can. And then from the Chargers side, they have a couple of cornerbacks that are hurt. Michael Davis and Asante Samuel Jr. are both out. So makes Mac Jones a little bit more interesting. In a 2-quarterback league, I think that you can see the Patriots. I also just like the Patriots in this game a little bit more. So actually, we know the Chargers. The Chargers are playing. Dwayne, who are the Chargers playing this week? They're playing the Eagles, right?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, not Mac Jones. That's who they played last week. The Philadelphia Eagles.
Friday, Andrew. It's Friday.
So maybe it gets a little bit easier for Jalen Hurts. If you've been riding Hurts, I think that maybe he might have a little bit more of a productive day through the air. But
and Hurts is fine, folks. It's funny, how many people have come to me. Hey, do I drop Jalen Hurts for Taysom Hill, or do I start Taysom Hill for Jalen Hurts? Look, how many data points do we have with Jalen Hurts? We have 8. How many of them have been good? 7. So just roll with it. Yeah, he has issues. He has his warts, but for fantasy purposes, you just got to keep rolling with Jalen Hurts.
All right. And that's going to do it for the injury pod. Dwayne, we made it in less than an hour and 20 minutes. Ian will be proud. I know that he's going to go back and listen to the entire thing and critique us, give us notes after we wrap up here. But any final words, thoughts? What are you working on for the site? Where can the people find you? Lay it on me.
Yeah, I mean, you guys can find me at Dwayne McFarland, DWAINMCFARLAND on Twitter. Of course, you can find me over at Pro Football Focus. I will have updated rankings and tiers dropping tomorrow morning. I will be working on updating my rankings themselves. Whether your guys are looking at, half point, full point, standard, whatever, be working on those for the rest of this evening through early tomorrow morning, throughout the weekend, really. So if you guys want to check out based on any of the updates and the news that's coming out, and you can check out all the guys. You can get Andrew, you can get Ian, myself, you get Nate Yonke, Kevin Cole. We're all here for you.
Awesome. Well, Dwayne, I think we've said it all. We've broken down all these injuries. So I'm on Twitter at AndrewX_Ian. I hope that we made you proud. And everybody, great luck this week. And thank you all for tuning in.